So I'll just go off camera while I put this all around the image. I've actually put some interior pencil lines on at this stage in this painting, whereas I didn't do it with Uluru. I kept it all sort of free of interior marks. But I feel because this is a lot more complex scene, you know, especially in the foreground, I wanted those marks to just help me and guide me a little bit. So to start with, I'm thinking back to my, you know, my sort of emotive response to this when I did it. And I just love the wildness of it, the sort of the bleak moor with all the elements, you know, sort of the wind is obviously blowing, the soil, the air, and it's obviously a moist place because of the amount of lush sort of greenery. There's no body of water in there, but I feel it's quite an elemental and quite sort of primeval scene. So I'll want to sort of keep this sort of quite moody look when I do my watercolour. So the colour choices as I go along will be in response to that. They may stick quite closely to the colours I've used there, and they may deviate, but what I won't deviate too far from, I hope, is my value tonal sketch, which is the palest images part is the sky, the middle tone is this middle distance hill, and the foreground is the darkest area with some tonal sort of contrast in there, but not enough to break it up too much. So let's get going. I've got a collection of brushes as usual. I'm going to dunk all of those in a pot of water and watch all the air bubbles escape, give them a flick, and then dry all the shafts so that there's no droplets of water going to run down, and then pull away. And I've activated all my brushes. I like to reshape any of the larger ones, actually smaller, so that they are in their shape and not skewed, you know. So I'll lay those then on my little flannel, which is just to the side if I zoom out a bit. See that? My flannel there next to my palette. Okay. Zoom back in now. So first of all, I'm going to wet the whole thing. So I'll be painting wet into wet for this scene. I'm using a flat 1-inch brush to do that. It seems about the right size for this format painting. I mean, obviously as you progress you'll get a sense of the right size brush for the job. And once again I'm working this water in because it'll give me a lot of thinking time and working time. It'll hold moisture so that I can manipulate my washes, so that I can wipe out paint, and so that paint can flow. So those are the reasons why I'm wetting the paper first. There's no law that says you can't just get on and put colour on without wetting the surface. It's just I want to use wet into wet technique for this landscape. Let's see how we're looking at moisture. You can see the moisture there now. Moist all over. A little bit too moist yet. I wouldn't want to put a wash in there yet because there's surface water is a little bit too much in evidence. I'd wait another sort of 30 seconds or so and then look at it again. Always be able to pick your board up. Make sure you haven't got, you know, like I've got. Make sure you haven't got too much stuff. Definitely don't have any equipment on there. But have it so that you can pick your board up and see. See that's puddling in the corner there? So that means there's too much. So you can tip it back, share that water out across the horizontal plane of the painting. See? So you keep it nice and consistently moist all over. I just tip it back and forth as it's settling in. And you know, now I'm quite excited because I'm going to start off with a sort of green and yellow sky, which is quite unusual for me. So this is the fun of having done the exploration, you know, in a smaller study or in a study with slightly different media. So let's see how we go. Pick up some zoisite. I apologise for that little blur that's happening every so often. I don't know why that is. I hope it's not going to play up too much today because I've wiped the lens of the camera. I'm not jolting the table. So I hope it's going to be good viewing for you. So there's my zoisite. I'm not too worried about it going across any of the other planes. Pick up a little bit of that aureole in now. Right, that's gone too green. I'm going to rinse that brush so that I can pick up some pure aureole in. I always mix it like that on the palette so that the paint has got enough water on it, you know, so it's not an actual blob. Let's put that yellow in strongly there. I'm going to pick that and tilt it. You can see the moisture in the paper. See how it's drying out a little bit there, mind? I'll have to watch that. The bottom of the painting is okay, but the sky is already drying a little bit. And what I might introduce now as well is a little squirt of water. So I've got my bottle of water. I'm going to spray it into this yellow area so that it'll run across. See, I've got a runner all across the top there, never mind. I just want to suffuse this now and let the water, the running water, obliterate my brush strokes, and that's made that yellow flow and fuse a bit more softly. Don't be afraid of picking your board up and tipping it round, especially for an abstract. You know, this is how you get things moving, how you get strange and unusual shapes. Okay. So now, if I want to paint that the middle tone now, I'm going to need to work less wet. So I'm going to mix up some of the Avapi brown. Oh, sorry, that's quinacridone. Some of the Avapi brown, a little bit of water, just to help it blend a little bit more. You bring your Avapi brown. And then opposite that, a little bit of Indian Throne Blue. Oh, yeah. A bit more Indian Throne Blue. So those two sort of dull each other, but they're a nice brown mix. Right, so that's fusing there now as well. So I'm just going to let that fuse now and see what happens there. With a smaller brush, about a size 2, and pick up a bit more of that aureolin. A little bit more moisture, so it's a pigmented mix. And I'm going to drop some of that in there, so that it'll sort of fuse the two planes together with that yellow blur. And again, see how moist everything still is? I'm going to let that run. Let the pigments run a bit more. Okay. Because different to Yupo, with watercolour, we can go back in and, you know, lift colours out more subtly and things like that. And we can put colours in and blend them back in more subtly than we can with Yupo. So for now, I'm not worried about definition so much. Now then, for the foreground and the heather areas, what I'd like to do now is I'm going to put that purple, the purpley heather on first, and then put the greener grass and everything on, and the sort of the tufty sort of vegetation on. That's rose of ultramarine and ultramarine violet there. That's that colour I want, and maybe a bit of moon glow. More rose of ultramarine. Right, so let's keep my value plan there. I love that colour going on. This is committing me now to this sort of purple area of heather, which goes up into the rocks. And I'm just going to drop some in the middle distance as well. Now I'm going to go straight and pick up my zoisite green. And I fancy a bit of this green gold, so that'll give me a dulled, warmer green. And then I'm going to put this in quickly at the base of those heather patches, to give the idea that the heather, you know, is in tufts and growing in amongst that. Actually, I better put those stones in as well with some dark brown for now. This will bleed. Don't worry about the bleeding, because we are going to be able to fine tune that. I just want everything to be watercolour-y and bleeding. Okay, let's let that go. See how moist everything still is? This is how moist you need to have your paper, because if you haven't got consistently moist paper all over, you won't get uniform, you know, bleeds. You'll be constantly trying to re-wet, and then everything gets a little bit blobby and you get back runs. So I'm going to hold this in this position for quite some time now, and if you can patiently watch with me. I know it's at a funny angle, but I need to keep it at least sort of 80 degrees for it to let this purple heather fuse with that zoisite green and the green gold that I painted in. I'm just doing spectacular things, isn't it? What I want is this lovely underpainting. See this whole wave ridge. I want that to flow back in now, so that it doesn't end up being a back run. So I've got to let that ridge and wave, it's almost like coming forward, let it come forward and let it bleed in at this stage. See, that's all softening nicely now. And at this stage, I'm squinting at it. My sky is paler than the foreground, but there's no tonal contrast really with the middle ground, so I'll need to make sure I correct that quite soon into the next stage when I start to sort of sharpen everything up, or I could try and correct it now. Personally, I think I might just try and correct it now and add some stronger foreground colour, which would separate everything out then. So that's how it's looking at the moment. Right, so let's get some stronger heather colour. And I'm going to make it less runny as well, so more viscous. So less water. I'll have some more of that rose of ultramarine and some more zoisite green, and those two sort of cancel each other out. Very subtle. I'm going to add that in now. Right, well, I'm going to have to commit now to more of it while I've still got it on the page, because that's a lovely colour to use. There's a darker patch in there. Cut in around those fallen stones a little bit with it. Here. So I've got this darker ridge now separating the foreground from the middle ground. It's still quite sort of contrasty within the foreground, but I've always got the chance to darken that off. So I've got, as I squint at this now, I've got pale sky, I've got the middle ground, it's a little bit patchy overall, and then I got the foreground darkness. What I'm going to do is rinse my brush really well. I'm going to pick up some more of that Yavapai brown that I used in that middle ground. A little bit of quinacridone burnt orange as well. It's not very runny because I want this to go back on now and act as a fusing layer. Sorry, off camera there. And these are the fine tunings, you know, that you do as you go along, okay? So I'm just going to unify that a little bit more. Rinse my brush again. I'm ignoring that little chink there because that's going to be a sunlit rock. I'm using a thirsty brush now, so I'm using this. I wiped it on a flannel. Okay, keep it nice and flat. Oh, a bit red. So flat. And I'm going to very gently, very subtly, while this is still moist, lift out down in the dip of this middle ground. Just lift out very slowly a shave of pigment, so that it separates the middle ground a bit more from the foreground. I don't want it to be too strong, but as you can see from the tonal plan, It is a bit paler down in there, and it goes dark, but I think if I extend the paleness down, then that, try not to make it as pale as the sky though, we can get away with it. Even if it's in one or two places, it doesn't have to be a solid line of paleness all across that wedge. Just this sort of half, or preferably an asymmetrical amount. So I'll go back to 3/4 then. So 3/4 of this, let's pale it down a bit. And the paint will seep back in. So it will not look so hard and bright as it is there. I'm just going to lift that sort of blob shape off because that's catching my eye. Let's go back to the sky and look at our value pattern in the sky. The lightest area of the sky was here. So I can, again, with a thirsty flat brush, just breathe lightly on it, just whisk away some paint, just to give a little bit of tonal contrast in the sky. And what else? In the middle distance, well, I think I'll go back into that when it's dry, but for now, those are the sort of highlights I wanted to get out. There's a bit more of a highlight behind the rock there, so I might try and lift that with a thirsty brush as well. This gives a bit more mood and a feeling of the sky. Now, I feel like the sky, I want to keep it like that. I don't want to darken it anymore. Okay, I think there's enough going on in there. So I'm going to leave all of this to dry now, because the paint is still a bit moist, look. So it's still moving in tiny little millimeters, tiny increments. So I'm going to let it have its head. I'm going to stop, go make a cup of tea and forget about it for a little while, and come back when it's bone dry and reassess for my next application of colour. The painting's had about an hour to dry now, and I was just going to come back in and do some more work on it, and I like the way that it's dried out. I can see better now what the actual tones and values are with the paint in its dried form. Sometimes it's good to leave it dry, because when they're wet the paints look darker than they actually end up being. Okay, so but I've just felt the paint in and it's way too cool. There's a lot of moisture still in there, and so I'm going to give it a lot longer to dry. I don't really want to hair dry this painting, because when you hair dry paint on the watercolour paper, on the cotton rag paper, it can sort of scorch the paint, and I think it just dulls the vibrancy. So I'm going to leave it dry a little bit longer and work on something else in the meantime. Painting is bone dry now, and again I'm reassessing it for tonal contrast, and sometimes, as you know, I like to turn things upside down because it helps my eye see things a bit better. Now, as I'm looking at that, I see that overall the foreground could do with darkening in general, you know, and also the distant hill could do with a bit of darkening. These rocks, I don't want to lose all of the frontage because they need to be sort of paler. So while it's bone dry, what you can do is come along then with a big moist brush and drop in a veil of, I'm going to make a mix now of the Rose of Ultramarine, just to say, the colour picking up on this camera isn't actually, as true as it could be. That's quite more of a violet purpley colour, but it looks very dark and dull here. But it's a veil of colour. Then some Indian throne blue. And then I'm going to put a bit of cobalt teal green in there as well. Just want to add a veil of colour over everything in the foreground. But before I put that veil of colour on, I'd say that that's a pigmented wash. It's not quite a glaze, it's a bit thicker than that. But what I'm going to do to help it go on is I'm going to wet the whole of the foreground very carefully with clear water. Just I'm using the side of my brush to lay water on, so that when I float this pigmented purpley wash on top, it'll be helped onto the paper. So I wanted to show you this to show you just how you can, you see, re-wet an area like that, and the wash underneath won't move about too much, because with cotton rag paper it holds it steady, holds it fast. Okay, I mean, if I were to scrub back and forth, of course the paint would come off, but if you do this very light gradual veil, then you can get away with it. So I'm floating this extra veil of purple over everything, because I feel the whole foreground now needs unifying. Right, that's brought it all together a lot more. I felt it needed unifying. I felt it was too contrasting. So again, while I've got this moist state, I think I'll switch to a smaller brush now and go for those much darker stone colours now. So I'm going to use some zoisite. No, that's a bit wet there. Let me just get tissue and take that off. I thought I had a clean dry palette there. So I want to go quite a pigmented mix now. I don't want it to be too runny, so I'll have some of that zoisite and rose of ultramarine and a tiny bit of water. So that's a pigmented mix, quite strong. And I'm going to get these very strong boulders in now. So this is a mix of a dark purple and green, and it's quite gooey, so it's not going to flare very much. So it's giving me a lot more drama now. So let's cut in around these stones here. So I'm getting those darker shapes. There. There's a bit of a gap in between those two stones. I'll just cut that in. And there's a lot more dark around the one stone that's jutting up in the air a bit. Okay, so I've fused things together, a lot more there in the foreground. I can just show you the moisture that was there to help me do that. So now I've still got some moisture going on in the foreground. I want to echo that yellow. So it's aureoling, quite viscous. So that's a viscous mix, I'd say there, okay? I'm going to pop that in on the faces of those slabs. So there's an echo of that yellow. I'll also put some in these fallen slabs that are on the ground to echo that colour. I could go stronger, so I will. It's always better to go a bit tentative at first with the colour and see what you can get away with before going deeper, stronger. Right, I feel I need some stronger, a green accent now in the foreground. So I will add some of this green gold. Again, I'm making a viscous mix, so it's quite strong on my size 10 brush. And I'm going to put that in amongst, just to sort of green up the underlying heather, you know, the sort of the leaves and things of the heather. The flowering heather is obviously the purplish colour. So I brought some green, and this is quite a warm green. It's got quite a touch of yellow in it. Okay. And at this point I'd like to let that run. So I'll zoom out. So you can see the hues a lot better in this light, can't you? The camera does, you know, affect the colour, unfortunately. Not a lot we can do about that. So I'm just letting it have a little run. I might introduce a bit of water because I'd like it to run a bit more strongly. Just a few little bits in that green foreground there. Just letting it get a bit of momentum going now. I'm keeping it at 90 degrees practically. So I like this tumble of shapes, this tumble of dark, sort of moody shapes in the foreground, which is sort of continuing the theme I had when I did the Yupo study. Okay, so there's the feeling of the undergrowth and the vegetation sort of sprawling out. There, the colour's better if I hold it this close for you to see. Alright, so let's place it back. So I feel we're almost there. I'm tempted to just quickly wipe out some of the fallen slabs because I've lost those a little bit with that running effect. So a thirsty brush. I'll zoom in. Just sort of reclaim these. They might need a few wipes because it's quite moist and the paint will just seep back in. I'll try and keep a hard edge on some of them. If I can just drag the brush by its tip and it sort of carves out quite a hard edge then. You know, maybe a little bit of a hard highlight there on that sunlit slab, and same again on the other one. So we got a mix of that yellow and then an actual highlight as well, so just making it a bit wider. So I'm going to keep wiping this out. What I can do as well is resort to a tiny piece of folded tissue in a sort of right angle shape and press that in, so I've got those a little bit better placed and more visible. There. Okay, I'm going to just pull out as well. Before I finish, there's a lighter area there and there, so I'm going to use the tissue again so that I don't overwork this by wiping and wiping. I'm going to press it in a little bit more tissue as well to pick out some of this lightish area in amongst the green and the heather. And when you press the tissue to get a highlight, you'll get a slightly different highlight than if you do it with a brush. I don't like to use it everywhere, but a couple of well placed wipes with tissue paper does give you a nice effect. I like it. So I'll break that up. And I think I'm going to call it a day. I shouldn't unify that. I like the overall mood and feel of this, and so I'm just going to let it dry for a little minute and then come back and take the edges off and see how it's looking. Right, so I'm ready now to pull off my tape. Okay. With that nice crisp edge, it's always easier to assess your painting, I feel. And there we are. I'm really liking that. Feels quite soft and quite wistful. I like the combination of the violet with the green and then the sort of nondescript grey pale sky in the background. So I'm going to put it up on an easel to have a look at it and show you that in the next clip. Okay, so now to get a little more perspective of them and in better light, which I hope will show off the purple a bit better, in particular of the heather scene, the Windswept Moor. I've put them on two little easels in my studio, and also you can get an idea of the size of them, you know, the scale of them in regard to other things. Okay, so if I just come in a little bit closer for you. Okay, so what I'm wanting to show is I'm about 4 feet away now, and the patterns are still nice and readable, and I feel like overall they are an abstract feel about them, in that things are quite lots of soft edges and lots of suggestions rather than detail, and that's as far as I want to go with them at this point. So I hope that you've enjoyed that video, with the last 2 videos actually, and we'll have a third one now to sort of make a trio, and then we're going to be moving on to a different section and to different working methods.